My name is Brielle Turner, but everyone calls me Elle. I'm 29 years old, and until a few months ago, I thought love meant leaning so close to someone that you forgot where you ended and they began. Raymond, 27. Charming, endlessly composed, was the kind of man who seemed built for stability. While the world was unraveling during the pandemic, he became my constant morning coffee, late-night Netflix, whispered reassurances when I couldn't breathe through the uncertainty. When I lost my job, it felt natural to let him take the wheel of my life. He handled the bills, chose where we ordered dinner from, decided which movie we watched, which friends we saw. I told myself that was comfort. In truth, it was dependency wearing a silk disguise. It started small little sighs when I texted him too often during work hours, a subtle roll of the eyes when I asked what he wanted for dinner. Then one evening, over leftover pasta, he put down his fork and said the sentence that split my chest open. Elle, you're too dependent on me. It's exhausting being your whole world. The words hung in the air sharp as broken glass. I remember forcing a laugh, pretending to take it lightly. Okay, I said quietly, I'll work on that. He nodded, relieved, as if he'd just performed a mercy. But inside, something shifted. It wasn't anger, not yet, just a quiet sting of recognition. He wasn't wrong. I was dependent. I'd built my days around him like a house with no exits. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of how my life used to have color before everything turned Raymond blue. The next morning, I started making changes. It began with something simple, calling Tessa my college roommate and the one friend I hadn't spoken to in months. She screamed when she heard my voice. Well, look who finally remembered her best friend exists. We laughed, made plans for coffee. Then I found my old running shoes, laced them up, and went for a jog alone. The air felt unfamiliar in my lungs, sharp and clean. Within a week, I joined a pottery class downtown, something I'd always said I didn't have time for. Raymond smiled when I told him. See? This is what I meant, he said. I'm proud of you. But his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. By week 2, I'd filled my evening ceramics on Mondays, yoga on Wednesdays, drinks with Tessa on Fridays. I texted Raymond less, let him have his space just as he'd asked. Funny thing, the less I reached for him, the more he reached for me. You've been busy lately, he said one night, voice tight. I thought that's what you wanted, I replied. Yeah, but communication's still important. He was right again, but this time I could hear the discomfort beneath the logic. Therapy came next. Dr. Coleman's office smelled like rain and new paper. She asked why I was there. Because I don't know who I am without someone to need, I told her. She smiled gently. Then that's exactly who we'll find. Those sessions were quiet revelations. I started to realize that love wasn't supposed to be a life raft. It was supposed to be an oar, something that helped you move forward, not something that kept you floating in circles. As I rebuilt myself, small victories stacked like fragile dominoes. Cooking a full dinner without asking Raymond's opinion, laughing too loud with Tessa in a crowded cafe, catching my reflection one morning and thinking, she looks happy. But Raymond noticed. He noticed the way I hummed while getting ready. How my phone lit up with new names, how I didn't ask if he'd be home for dinner anymore. One Sunday while folding laundry, he asked, "You're different lately. Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Everything's okay." That was the first time in a long time the word okay felt like freedom. Still, something in his tone stayed with me, like he was losing control of a story he thought he was writing alone. That night, as he fell asleep beside me, I lay awake, listening to his even breathing, wondering if he was dreaming of someone still small enough to fit into his arms without taking up space. Because the truth was, the more I found myself, the less he seemed to recognize me. The following weeks felt like sunlight after a long storm. I didn't realize how small my world had become until I started stepping outside of it. I woke up earlier, ran before work, started bringing home grocery bags filled with things that were just for me. Jasmine Tea Watercolor paints a small journal that said "Begin Again" on the cover. Raymond noticed. At first, he praised every change. "Look at you, Elle," he'd say. "You're glowing. Guess you were right," I teased once. I needed my own life. He smiled, but it looked tight, like the stretch of skin over something about to crack. My independence didn't make him happy. It made him uneasy. When I stayed out late with Tessa, he'd text, "Having fun." "Who's there? When are you coming home?" Once, when I didn't reply quickly enough, he sent, "I'm not trying to control you, I just worry." But it wasn't worry, it was withdrawal. He'd gotten addicted to being needed. One Friday, he told me he was going out for guys' night. I smiled, genuinely happy for him. "Good, you deserve a break." I spent that evening at a painting workshop Tessa had dragged me to. For the first time in years, I didn't check my phone. Didn't need to. I came home to find Raymond already asleep, phone face down beside him. Nothing unusual, except the faint trace of perfume that wasn't mine. The next morning, he was all tenderness, coffee pancakes, good humor. But I caught the flicker in his eyes when I mentioned how late he got in. "Oh, it wasn't that late," he said quickly. "You must have been dreaming." Maybe I replied, though my gut whispered otherwise. I brushed it off, at least I tried to. Old habits die hard, and I was still learning to trust my instincts. A week later, something strange happened. Raymond came home early from work, arms full of takeout, acting overly affectionate. Between kisses, he murmured, "I just feel like you've been slipping away from me lately." His hands were gentle, but his tone wasn't. It was careful, measured, like he was testing how far my leash would stretch. That night in therapy, I told Dr. Coleman about it. She leaned forward, slightly fingers folded. "People who control through care," she said, "often panic when you no longer need their permission to be happy." I laughed softly, but it stuck with me. By the third week, I'd joined a small weekend group through Tessa's gym morning runs brunch laughter that didn't require explanation. When I told Raymond, he tilted his head. "Do any of these people happen to be men?" "A few, yeah. Just wondering." His smile was thin again. It struck me how different we'd become. I was learning to breathe. He was learning to hold his breath. Then one Saturday night, I opened social media. A mutual friend had posted a group photo at a rooftop bar. Raymond was there grinning with a beer in hand, his arm casually draped around a woman I didn't know. She leaned into him like she'd been there before. Her lipstick was the same shade as the mark I'd seen on his shirt a week ago. For a long minute, I just stared. No rage, no tears, just clarity. The kind that burns quiet. I didn't text him, didn't call, didn't ask. I just saved the photo proof, not for anyone else, but for myself. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That night, as I washed my face, I looked at my reflection and thought, some men want a woman strong enough to survive, but not strong enough to walk away. And for the first time, I wondered if Raymond truly meant what he'd asked for. Because lately it seemed like my freedom wasn't the thing he wanted, it was the thing that scared him most. The night I found out, I didn't scream. I didn't throw things or call Tessa in tears. I just sat there on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, looking at that photo of Raymond and the woman with the red lipstick. He looked happy. Not the forced, polite smile I'd been getting lately, but the kind that comes from being seen, wanted, admired. The kind I used to give him. And in that moment, something in me quietly shut off. It wasn't heartbreak, it was closure. Like realizing the book you've been clinging to is missing half its pages. The next morning, he woke up early, humming in the kitchen. The smell of coffee filled the apartment, familiar and cruel. I watched him pour 2 cups the way he always did. He handed one to me with that casual charm that used to melt me. Morning sunshine. I almost laughed. Sunshine. He'd said that same word to someone else the night before. I could tell by the way it felt used when it hit my ears. I placed the mug down untouched. "Raymond," I said quietly, "were you at that rooftop bar last night?" "Yeah. Why?" "Looked like a good time." "It was. Work friends." He didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. And in that moment, I understood he'd already practiced lying to me. I didn't confront him further. Didn't need to. That night after he fell asleep, I opened my laptop and started looking for apartments. The next day, I went to the leasing office of a small building downtown. The woman at the desk asked if I needed a roommate. "No," I said. "Just peace and a lock." By the afternoon, I'd signed a 6-month lease. When I got home, Raymond was sprawled on the couch watching a game. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey, where have you been running errands?" I said simply. He didn't notice the slight tremor in my voice, or maybe he did and chose to ignore it. I went into the bedroom, pulled out my suitcase, and began packing. Clothes, laptop, my mother's ring, the mug that said, "Do no harm, take no shit." When he came to the doorway, his tone was half amusement, half suspicion. "What are you doing, leaving?" The smile fell. "What do you mean, leaving?" "You wanted me to be independent. I'm practicing." He blinked like he hadn't expected his own words to become real. "Elle, don't be dramatic. I'm not. I'm decisive." He followed me around the apartment, saying all the things people say when they're losing control, but don't want to look like it. "We can fix this. It was just a picture. You're overreacting." But I'd already stepped out of the cage. And when you finally breathe fresh air, the idea of walking back inside feels impossible. By midnight, I was gone. Left my key on the counter along with a short note. "Raymond, you told me to build my own life. You were right. I just didn't realize it meant leaving the one built around you. The next morning, the text started. Elle, please, let's talk. You're taking things out of context. It wasn't cheating, it was just a moment. I love you, you know that. I didn't respond. By noon, the tone had shifted. You're being cold. You're acting like I'm the villain. Is this how you repay love with silence? Still no response. That evening, a final one came through. You think you're so strong now, but you'll come back. You always do. I looked at the screen for a long time before typing a single line back. Not this time. Then I blocked his number. That night in my half-empty new apartment, I sat cross-legged on the bare floor, surrounded by boxes, breathing the scent of paint and dust and freedom. It wasn't peace yet, just quiet. But quiet was a start. I thought of something Dr. Coleman had said in our last session. When you stop needing someone, you start seeing them clearly. I'd seen Raymond clearly, and what I saw wasn't love, it was ownership wrapped in affection. I whispered to the empty room. You asked for independence, Raymond. You just didn't think I'd find mine without you. The silence that answered me was the sweetest sound I'd heard in years. Moving out didn't end the story. It just changed the battlefield. A week of silence passed before the whispers began. At first, it was small things, mutual friends going quiet in group chats, unread messages that suddenly stayed that way. Then Tessa called, her voice uneasy. Elle, did you tell anyone what happened with Raymond? No. Why? Because he's telling people you had a breakdown, that you ran away after some emotional episode. I almost laughed. The irony was bitter. Raymond had always hated chaos, now he was creating it just to stay in control. By the second week, his version of the story was everywhere. He told his coworkers I'd been unstable for months, told friends I was seeing someone from therapy, and told his mother that I'd used him financially. The same people who used to comment #couple goals on our photos were now messaging me things like, hope you're okay, girl, you seem off lately. Off. That was his favorite word. He'd said it about me for years whenever I didn't fit his version of who I was supposed to be. When I told Dr. Coleman about the rumors, she didn't look surprised. This is called narrative control, she explained. When people lose real power, they rewrite the story to make themselves the victim. That hit deep, because Raymond had always been the calm, logical one, the man who handled things. Now he was handling me the only way he knew how, by trying to break the version of me that walked away. Then it escalated. On a Tuesday morning, my manager called me into his office. Elle, we got an odd phone call. Someone claiming to be concerned about your mental health. Said you might be acting erratically. I already knew who. I smiled, calm but shaking inside. Was his name Raymond? My boss's expression told me everything. We don't take those calls seriously, but I figured you should know. As soon as I left his office, I sat in my car for 10 minutes just breathing. Control, it was always about control. Even now, he was trying to decide what version of me people saw. That night I went home and started saving everything. Texts, screenshots, old messages where he'd asked for money or admitted guilt. If Raymond wanted to play reputation chess, I'd learn the rules. I didn't lash out, didn't post a single thing. Silence became my shield. And silence, I was learning, can be deafening when someone's expecting chaos. Tessa tried to comfort me. You could post your side. People would believe you. I don't need them to, I said. I just need to stay free. Freedom, I realize, doesn't come with applause. It comes with rumors, loneliness, and people who'll never know the truth. But it's still freedom. A few nights later, Raymond's mother, Patricia, called. Her voice was trembling between anger and worry. Brielle, I just can't believe you'd treat my son this way. He says you left without warning, that you're telling lies about him. I let her finish before replying softly. Ask him who the woman with the red lipstick is, Patricia. Then call me back. She didn't. The next day, Raymond posted something vague on social media. When someone you love changes overnight, you realize they were never who you thought. Dozens of sad face reactions. One comment from the red lipstick woman, you deserve peace. That was the moment I knew he wasn't just lying, he was performing. And I refused to give him an audience. Dr. Coleman asked me, how does all this make you feel? I smiled faintly. Weirdly powerful, I said. Because for once, he can't make me respond. That's growth, she said. No, I replied. That's survival. By the end of that month, Raymond's lies began collapsing under their own weight. Mutual friends started reaching out again cautiously. Elle, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to believe. You don't need to apologize, I told them. I stopped needing anyone to. The truth didn't need me to shout. It just needed time. And I had all the time in the world now because I finally had my life back. Still, one part of me knew men like Raymond don't stop when the lies stop working. They just find new ways to reach you. So when the knock came on my apartment door the next morning, I wasn't surprised to see his shadow through the peephole. His voice on the other side of the door was low, ragged. Elle, please, just talk to me. I didn't move. The sound of it, the same voice that once felt like home, now scraped like metal against glass. He knocked again, harder this time. You ruined everything. You walked out. You made me the bad guy. Do you even care what you did to me? I stayed silent. The silence wasn't cold, it was armor. Finally, my neighbor cracked open his door. Everything all right here? Raymond turned toward him wild-eyed. Mind your business. I'll call the cops if you don't leave, the neighbor said. That's when Raymond's mask cracked. Go ahead, he shouted. Maybe they'll make her face me for once. 10 minutes later, flashing lights painted the hallway blue. The officers were calm, almost bored, clearly used to scenes like this. One of them asked, "Ma'am, does this man live here?" "No." "Then, sir, you'll need to leave or risk trespassing." Raymond's eyes met mine through the peephole before he turned away. The last thing he said was almost a whisper. "You'll regret this, Elle." He was wrong. The only thing I regretted was not walking away sooner. After that, everything began to unravel for him. Within a week, word spread that he'd been written up at work for harassment. HR found out about his false call to my employer. Someone had recorded him bragging about it at a bar. Karma apparently had good timing. Tessa texted me, "You're not going to believe this. Raymond got suspended. For what HR said, conduct unbecoming. Guess that PR smile finally cracked." I didn't reply right away. I just stared out my window, coffee in hand, feeling something I hadn't in months. Peace that didn't depend on anyone else's pain. Dr. Coleman noticed it too during our next session. "You seem lighter." "I'm not angry anymore," I told her. "I just don't care." That's detachment. It's a healthy step. She smiled, and for once I believed her. A few days later, I passed my project management certification. When I got the email, I cried not out of joy, but disbelief that I'd made it this far on my own. That night, I posted a quiet update on LinkedIn, certified independent, finally walking my own road. Within hours, the comments flooded in congratulations, support new opportunities. The only message that made my stomach turn came from an unknown number. "Congrats, Elle. I always knew you'd go far. Jay." I didn't respond. I just blocked the number and kept scrolling. Weeks later, I got an email, his last one. It was long, almost poetic in its desperation. "Elle, I've had time to think. I realize now what I did was selfish. But you changed too. You became so cold. It's like you planned your exit perfectly, left me drowning without a word. I made you strong, and now you're punishing me for it." There was a time that message would have wrecked me. Now I just felt nothing. He ended it with, "I hope you're happy, truly." I closed the email and whispered, "I am." Life didn't turn into some cinematic miracle after that. There were still lonely nights, still echoes of who I used to be. But every morning I woke up and made choices that belonged only to me. I started running again. Tessa and I planned a trip to Bali. I learned how to fix the leaky faucet in my apartment, and when it finally stopped dripping, I laughed out loud because it felt like a metaphor for everything. Freedom wasn't fireworks. It was quiet mornings, steady breath, and the soft realization that I didn't need anyone's permission to be happy. Raymond once told me, "You depend on me too much." He was right, but he never imagined the version of me who'd take those words and use them as a map out of his world. Now, when I think of him, it's not with hate, it's with understanding. He wanted a woman he could rescue. Instead, he created one who didn't need saving. And that, in the end, was the one thing he couldn't control. Final line. He asked